It was supposed to be a routine ride, just another overnight train from the city back to Daggers Hollow, my hometown buried deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. I hadn't been back in 10 years, not since my father died. But now, with my mother's sudden passing, I had to return. I arrived at the station late. The air was unusually cold for early autumn, and a dense fog rolled in, swallowing the tracks ahead. The digital board above Platform 9 flickered. Train 113, Daggers Hollow, on time. The platform was almost deserted, except for an old man in a conductor's uniform standing stiffly by the entrance gate. He didn't check my ticket. He just looked at me with clouded eyes and muttered, "You shouldn't be on this train." I smiled awkwardly and stepped past him. Maybe he was senile. Maybe he just meant the weather was bad. Either way, I didn't care. I just wanted to get home, sort through the house, and get out of that cursed place as quickly as possible. The train pulled in with a sharp metallic groan. It was old, not vintage old in a charming way, but worn out. Rust streaked its sides, and its windows were dark, giving me no view of the inside. When I boarded, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No passengers, no crew. Just a faint hum from the overhead lights, flickering slightly, like they couldn't decide whether to stay on or off. The smell was off too, like moldy wood mixed with something metallic. Blood, maybe? I tried to shake the thought off. I found a seat in the middle of the fourth car, near the window. The train jerked violently as it started to move, throwing me back. No announcement, no warning. The city lights faded quickly, and we were swallowed by the woods. My phone had no signal, typical for Daggers Hollow. I settled in, wrapping my coat tighter around me, and stared into the black outside. That's when I noticed the reflection. There was someone standing in the aisle behind me. I whipped my head around. Nothing, just empty rows of seats. I scanned carefully, up, down, both ends of the car. Nobody. I chuckled nervously, maybe just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling, that creeping sensation at the back of my neck, like someone was watching, breathing. The train entered a tunnel. Everything went pitch black for a second. Then the emergency lights snapped on, dim and red, bathing the car in an eerie glow. The train didn't slow down, it sped up. The sound changed, less mechanical, more organic, like the groaning of something alive, something huge and ancient moving through stone. I stood up to check the next car. The door wouldn't budge. I tried the one behind me, locked. I was trapped in that car. I banged on the metal, shouting for help, but my voice echoed back at me, swallowed by the humming of the train. That's when I heard the footsteps. Click, clack, slow, steady, coming from the far end of the car. I turned around. Nothing, but the steps continued, closer, louder. Click, clack. I crouched behind a row of seats, heart hammering. The air was suddenly freezing, my breath visible. Then I saw it. Something tall, almost touching the ceiling. Humanoid, but wrong. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over bones. Eyes black and sunken. It had no mouth, just a gaping vertical slit where its face should be. It passed by me slowly, sniffing the air, like it could sense me. I held my breath. It stopped 3 rows ahead, turned, faced me, and then it screamed. Not with a voice, but with my own thoughts. It filled my head with static and pain and screams that weren't mine, but sounded like they could have been. I blacked out. I woke to silence. The car was empty. Red lights gone, back to flickering white. Was it a dream? The train had stopped. I looked outside. Trees. A dense forest, twisted and gnarled. Not Daggers Hollow. Not anywhere I recognized. I got up. The door now opened easily. The next car looked like the inside of a hospital. White tiled walls, flickering surgical lights, rusty medical tools strapped to the seats. Blood smeared the windows. I stepped in, slowly. That's when I heard my mother's voice,
calling me, soft, gentle, just like I remembered it. Jason. I froze. She was dead. I knew she was dead, but the voice came again, closer this time. Jason, come here, sweetheart. It was coming from the luggage compartment under a seat. I crouched, hand trembling, and opened the hatch. Inside was a decayed body, my mother's face twisted in agony, mouth moving, eyes wide. I screamed and slammed the hatch shut, stumbling backward. The train groaned again and started moving. The lights flickered off. Darkness. Only her voice, whispering over and over. Come home. Come home. Come home. I ran, car after car, each one worse than the last. One was filled with shadowy figures hanging from the ceiling. Another was a child's bedroom, looping a lullaby over and over, the stuffed animals watching me with real eyes. I ran until I reached the engine. The conductor's seat was empty. The controls were rusted and broken, melted together like wax. I saw something through the front glass. A massive black void ahead. No tracks, no lights, nothing. We were headed into it. I tried to stop the train, yanked at levers, punched buttons. Nothing worked. Then, the door behind me slammed open. The thing was there again, closer now, smiling somehow through that slit of a mouth. Its arms stretched out, impossibly long. It didn't touch me. It just leaned in and whispered directly into my mind. You boarded a train for the dead. Welcome home. I don't know how I survived. I woke up in a hospital a day later, found on the side of an abandoned track deep in the woods. No train in sight, no passengers, no conductor, just me, screaming. They say train 113 hasn't run since 1974, derailed in the mountains during a storm. Everyone died. I saw the passenger list. My name was on it. I shouldn't be here. I still hear it sometimes when I close my eyes. The hum of the tracks, the whisper in my mind. Welcome home.
I've never liked trains. There's something about the rhythmic clanking of the wheels, the metallic smell, the dim lighting. It all makes my skin crawl. But that night, I had no other option. My car had broken down on a remote road outside the city, and the only thing nearby was a small, old train station with one platform and a broken vending machine. The sign read, "Midnight Line, Northbound." I hadn't heard of it before. No schedule, no attendant, just an old man sitting on a wooden bench, humming a tune that didn't seem to end. "Does this train go to Rockford?" I asked him. He slowly turned his head, eyes cloudy. "It goes where it wants, but it always picks up the lost." I laughed awkwardly. Right, thanks, I guess. The train arrived exactly at midnight, without a sound. I mean it, no screeching brakes, no engine noise, just a heavy stillness, followed by the presence of the train. It was old, really old, the kind with brass railings and lantern-style lights on the side. No conductor in sight. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the doorway, I felt wrong, like I'd walked into someone's memory, not a real place. The air was thick and smelled of damp wood and old perfume. Only a few passengers sat silently in their seats, staring out the windows into the night, not moving, not blinking. I sat near the back, a few rows away from a middle-aged woman with a wide-brimmed hat and a child sitting across the aisle. The child turned and looked at me with dark, unblinking eyes. I gave a nervous smile. She didn't react. The train jolted and began to move. There was no announcement, no lights flickering on, no sense of direction, just movement. I looked out the window. Forest,
dense and endless. I didn't remember any woods this thick between the city and Rockford. I tried to check my phone. No signal, no time display, just a black screen. "Excuse me," I said to the woman nearby. "Do you know when we'll reach Rockford?" She didn't respond, didn't even flinch. I turned to look at the child again. She was gone. I stood up immediately, confused. She'd been right there. I looked up and down the car, but there was no sign of her, not even the sound of footsteps. It was like she had been erased. My breath caught in my throat as I sat down. That's when I noticed it. The reflection in the window showed someone sitting next to me. But when I turned my head, nothing. The seat was empty. I looked back at the glass. There it was again, a figure, pale face, hollow eyes, a hand slowly reaching from my shoulder. I jumped from my seat, heart pounding. I looked around to see if anyone else saw it, but they were all frozen, silent, like mannequins.
I ran toward the next car. The door was open, but instead of another passenger cabin, it was something else. The walls were lined with mirrors, all warped and dirty, and the floor was covered in old suitcases, ripped open, with clothes spilling out. Some were bloody, some were burnt. I heard whispers, dozens of them, coming from nowhere and everywhere. "Why did you leave us? You shouldn't be here. You never looked back." I turned around to escape, but the door I came through was gone. Just more mirrors. I ran forward, deeper into the strange car, until I found another door. It was slightly ajar, and behind it was my old bedroom from when I was a kid. Same posters, same desk, same flickering lamp. On the bed was a photo album. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Each page showed people I knew, my parents, my sister, old friends, but their faces were blacked out, scratched or burned. On the last page was a photo of me, sitting on this train. Suddenly, the light turned off. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, wet, something breathing. I didn't turn around. I just ran. I crashed through the next door and tumbled into another car, back in the regular passenger section. Except, this time, it was empty. Totally empty. The windows were black now, not dark, black, like there was nothing on the other side. I turned and screamed. The figure from the reflection stood in front of me. Tall, faceless, its skin was cracked and paper thin, and its chest opened like a mouth, revealing rows of yellow human teeth. It didn't move. It just stood there, breathing in and out with a sound like grinding stones. And then it spoke, not aloud, but directly into my head. "This train never stops for the living." I backed away slowly, but there was nowhere to go. The car was endless now, stretching for miles in both directions. I dropped to the floor and closed my eyes. When I woke up, I was lying on the side of an abandoned rail track, dirt in my mouth and blood on my shirt. The train was gone. The station was gone. And my phone, which had no signal the night before, suddenly lit up. Monday, June 1st. I had been gone for 3 days. I still don't know where I went, but sometimes at night, I hear the faint sound of a train in the distance, where no tracks exist. And when I look into dark windows, I see the reflection of someone standing behind me, still reaching, still waiting for me to come back aboard. It was just past midnight when I stepped onto the train platform, the cold air biting at my skin. The station was nearly deserted, save for a few scattered travelers waiting for the last train out. I was exhausted after a long day and just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. The train arrived with a soft screech, the doors sliding open with a hiss. I boarded and found an empty seat near the middle of the carriage. The inside of the train was dimly lit by flickering overhead lights, casting eerie shadows on the worn seats and scratched windows. The few passengers I saw looked tired and distant, their faces pale and expressionless. I shrugged it off and settled in, leaning back as the train began to move. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks was almost hypnotic, and I found myself relaxing, ready to doze off. But then, something felt off. The train didn't feel like it was moving forward. I glanced out the window, but saw nothing but an impenetrable blackness. No flicker of passing lights, no distant shapes or stations, just endless darkness. I tapped the window and looked again, but it was as if the train was suspended in a void. I looked around at the other passengers. They all stared straight ahead, not blinking, as if they were frozen in time. My unease grew, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just my imagination. Minutes passed. I checked my watch. The hands weren't moving. I glanced again, still frozen. My heart began to pound. I tried to stand, to walk to the front of the train and see if the driver could explain what was going on. But my legs felt like lead. I struggled to rise, but my body refused to cooperate. Panic began to set in. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. The overhead bulbs buzzed and dimmed, casting the carriage into near darkness. In the dim glow, I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the carriage. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its face was featureless, smooth like polished marble, but cracked in places like old porcelain. Its skin was pale and translucent, almost glowing faintly in the dark. The thing didn't move its head, but seemed to watch me with a presence that made my blood run cold. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure started moving toward me, slowly, with long, deliberate steps that made no sound on the floor. The passengers didn't react. They remained frozen, staring ahead like mannequins. I wanted to run, but my limbs wouldn't respond. The figure got closer and closer, its chest beginning to open like a grotesque mouth filled with jagged yellow teeth that clicked softly as if chewing. A sudden wave of nausea hit me, and my vision blurred. The world seemed to tilt. Then, as quickly as it had come, the figure vanished. The lights snapped back to normal, and the train jolted violently, throwing me against the seat in front of me.
I gasped for air, heart racing. Around me, the passengers blinked for the first time, as if waking from a long sleep. The train's windows now showed the familiar sights of the countryside passing by. The lights inside were steady and warm. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I'd imagined it all. But as I looked down, I noticed something chilling. A deep, fresh scratch on my wrist. It wasn't there before. I tried to tell someone, but the words caught in my throat. The passengers around me acted normal, chatting quietly or staring out the window. No one seemed to notice the strange figure or the suspended time. When the train finally reached my stop, I hurried off, the station bright and bustling like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. That night, I woke up to a cold whisper in my ear, barely audible but unmistakable. My name. I looked around my dark room, but no one was there. Since that night, I avoid trains whenever I can. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see those cracked porcelain eyes staring back at me in the dark. And I know that the train never truly stopped. I always take the night train from Marrow Station. It's quiet, cheap, and usually empty. That night was no different, or so I thought. I had missed the earlier train and was forced to catch the last one, the 2:13 a.m. I remember the time exactly because the glowing red digits on the platform clock were stuck on it, as if time itself didn't want to move forward anymore. When the train pulled in, it screeched louder than usual. It looked old, too old. The kind of train that should be retired and scrapped, not still running. The carriages were rusted around the edges, and the windows were so grimy I couldn't see through them. I hesitated for a second, then stepped on board. Inside, it was silent. Not the peaceful kind, but the type that makes your skin crawl. No announcements, no hum of electricity, just stillness. I walked down the aisle and picked a seat in the middle carriage. There were passengers, maybe 6 or 7 scattered throughout, all facing forward, not a single one moving or even breathing, it seemed. I didn't want to stare, but something about them felt off. Too stiff, too still. I pulled out my phone to pass the time. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no battery either. It had been at 70% just minutes ago. That was the first real warning sign. The train started moving, slowly, with a metallic groan that vibrated through the floor. Outside, I expected to see the city give way to suburbs and then forests, but all I saw was darkness. Solid, thick, impenetrable darkness, like the world outside didn't exist anymore. I leaned closer to the window, trying to see anything. Trees, streetlights, even our reflection. Nothing. It was like looking into ink. Then, a sound. A sharp knock on the window next to me. I froze. I was sitting in the middle of the train. The tracks were far below. No one could reach my window from outside. Another knock. This time louder, closer. I slowly turned my head toward the glass. Nothing was there, but the condensation on the inside of the window had a handprint, fresh, human-sized, still fading. I jerked back from the glass, heart pounding. I looked around at the passengers, still unmoving. One of them, a woman in a dark coat, was now turned toward me slightly, head tilted unnaturally to the side. Her mouth was open, wider than it should be, but her eyes were rolled back, completely white. I stood up. Enough was enough. I walked toward the front of the train. Every step echoed like a hammer in that silence. I passed more passengers, all now looking at me, not blinking, not breathing, just watching. I reached the conductor's door, locked. I banged on it. "Hey, this isn't funny. Stop the train." No answer. Then I heard whispers behind me. I turned. Every passenger was standing now, silent, heads tilted, smiling. But their smiles were wrong, stretched too far, split at the edges. One man's jaw hung loosely, as if broken, yet he still grinned. I ran.
Back through the carriages, past broken lights, shattered windows. I didn't care where I was going. I just wanted off. That's when I noticed it. Each carriage I passed was the same. The same crack in the window, the same torn seat, the same blood stain. I wasn't moving through the train. I was trapped in a loop. And worse, they were following. Slowly, never running, just walking. Closer, always closer. My lungs burned, my chest tightened. Then I saw it, an open door at the end of one carriage. It led into complete blackness, but it was the only thing different I'd seen. Without thinking, I jumped and fell for what felt like minutes. Then I hit the ground. I opened my eyes. I was in the woods, alone. The tracks behind me twisted and broken, leading nowhere. No sign of the train. No sign of the passengers. I don't know how I escaped. I walked until morning, found a road, a gas station, called a cab. When I told the driver what train I was on, he went quiet. That line doesn't run anymore, he said. Merrow Station's been closed for years. There was an accident on the 213 train back in 1987. It derailed. Everyone died. Now, I never take trains. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear that knock on my window, even though I live on the 5th floor. And I know that train still rides, looking for passengers who won't ever get off.